Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. This is, again, Leslie Pelch. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. I'm going to do a very brief sort of intro overview of the GoToWebinar interface, just so that we are all on the same page in terms of using the panel that you should see on the right side of your screen. If anybody doesn't see that panel, by the way, look down in your taskbar for an icon that looks a little bit like a blue flower. I'm not sure how else to describe that. It's kind of like a big blue simple flower, because I think I've had people in the past occasionally not realize the panel is supposed to be showing there. So you should all be seeing my computer screen, which just shows the VCGI website. On your panel, you should look for various sections, and one of the sections I want you to notice is the audio section. If you click on the plus sign next to the word audio, that is where you're going to change any settings that you need to if you're finding anything's not working. And unfortunately, I don't have my visual aid to show you this if you can't hear me, but hopefully everyone can hear me. If you need to change any settings or call in and get the actual number of this webinar in order to call in, you can find it in your audio section. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, you can click on the questions section of your panel and type in your question. The question will actually come to me, so you don't have to worry about disturbing Bill Morris, our presenter today. So it'll come to me. I'll make a judgment about whether it's something that needs to be answered right away or whether it can wait until the end of the webinar, and I'll just sort of collect those, and then I'll start reading through them towards the end. The only other thing I want to point out is that if you can find the little symbol that looks kind of like an orange hand with an arrow on it, or actually an orange hand, if you could click on that, that's the raising hand button, and it's really just a way to let me know that you can hear me. So if everybody could go ahead and click on that little orange hand, there we go. That's very reassuring to me, since the other thing I forgot to mention is that you are all muted, so you also don't have to worry about sound going on in your background. I'm going to keep you muted, not because I don't want to hear from you, but just because the sound issue obviously can come up with a webinar, and you will have the opportunity at any time to type in your questions and comments and send those. Okay, great. That's all I wanted to do for an intro. Oh, and actually the one other thing is I want to mention that this webinar is being recorded, and it will get posted at the VCGI YouTube page, which you can get to. If you go to our front page, down on the left navigation bar down below Connect with Us, you'll see the link to YouTube, and all of our webinars get posted here. And so you can go there probably by next week. I may not have a chance to get this posted this week, but sometime early next week that should get posted. Okay, so I am going to hand things over to our presenter today, Bill Morris, who works for Faraday and also has a relatively long history for a relatively young person in the open source world and the GIS world, and has been a great help to me actually in introducing me to this world and poking me a little bit every so often to make sure that I'm paying attention to it. So I will let Bill do any other intro he would like to do for himself, and I will hand things over to him.
I'm just going to go through the day on the glow of you having thought that I'm young.
Yes. Well, the older I get, the younger everyone else gets, so it's just the way it is.
Fair enough. All right, so my screen is visible?
Yes.
All right. So hi, everyone. As Leslie said, my name is Bill. I work for a company called Faraday, and that's out of Burlington. We do renewable energy analytics with a big mapping component, so that is my day-to-day work, is ensuring that those maps on the web work out okay. And something that I've been doing almost since they launched it is using what is increasingly becoming the platform of Mapbox, which is I guess you could best describe it as sort of like a hybrid of lots and lots of open source code with a software as a service business model. At least that's how people seem to be able to make a living with open source these days. But what we're going to focus on today is the platform called Mapbox Studio, which they just launched a couple of months ago. It's been in beta and alpha for about a year now, and I've had a chance to play around with it. This is a sort of a reimagining of a platform they previously had called TileMill, and we'll get into some of the differences as we go forward here. But the point of Mapbox Studio is to make fast and incredibly customized maps of the world. There are some limitations to the platform we're going to get to. I'm not a vendor, so I'm going to try and be I'm going to try and use candor where it's necessary here. And I'll definitely be psyched to hear what questions you guys have as we go along. So first of all, the link here takes you to Mapbox Studio. Let me move ahead here. If you guys want to follow along with these slides that I have, just go to tinyurl.com/vcgi-mapbox. And that link, I think, Leslie, are you going to post that somewhere too?
Sorry, I am here. I muted myself.
Yes.
Yes, that's a yes. Sorry,
yeah,
I muted myself.
No worries. Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose everybody. Cool. So follow the slides if you like there, but let's dive in. The general stuff that we're going to go through here is just do an overview of what's meant by tiled maps. Some of this is going to seem like a rehashing to some of you guys, and it'll be important new information for others. We'll go through how to sign up and install, then overview of the platform. We're going to talk about a code-driven map. So essentially this is CartoCSS, which some of you may be familiar with, and it'll be new to others, but we're going to start from an intro standpoint. Then we're going to go into some of the details of how to do effective and I guess like novel and compelling cartography on this platform. Obviously we don't have the time to cover every possible base on cartography, so I'm going to use that as an opportunity to show you some of the cool things I've discovered. And then we'll talk about how you publish maps from this platform. And just to be upfront about it, there are two options. There's a print option, which is very cool and did not exist in the TileMill platform before it, or at least not as robust of a tool. And then there's the web publishing, which will actually create a dynamic map for you on the web. So first, tiles. This is something that I'm not sure if Google originated it, but they definitely perfected it. The idea that when you have a map of the world in Web Mercator, that everything is a square, everything can be subdivided into precise squares, and that you can basically render the world in a series of nested tiles like this. So the example you're seeing here is that in that area of Lower Manhattan, the base is one section, and then the next level up you can see there's greater detail. That big tile has been chopped into 4 tiles, and then the next level up there's greater detail there. That other tile has been chopped into 4 more tiles. The idea here is that when you pre-render this information, like this volume of map data about the world, which is what Google at least started with, that you can make these things very fast on the web. You basically just have a series of PNG images that very quickly make it to a browser that you don't have to do any messing around with the geodata itself. You don't have to turn vector data into raster data. You don't have to render vector data. It just is meant for the web. So that is the sort of the tile paradigm that we have today for web maps. Pretty much every major mapping company uses this now. Also, every major mapping company sort of strains at the bonds of Web Mercator because we all hate it for the appropriate reasons, but because it makes the world a square, that's why we're using it. So that's talking about raster tiles. Those are pre-cached images. So obviously you zoom in really close on a raster tile and it becomes pixels. The limits of that are kind of obvious. Like there's sort of a lag between when that tile is rendered and when it makes it to the web. So you ideally have everything rendered ahead of time and then just serve it to the web. But that rendering takes time. TileMill originally was something that did that rendering. You basically would create your map, you'd style it however you wanted, and then started on a process to chop that up into web-ready PNG tiles. And that was fantastic because once it was ready, it was super fast on the web. The downside is that it could take as long as 3 days to export like a seemingly insignificant chunk of the world. Like the state of Vermont down to a fairly detailed street level zoom would take a day or two to export to those tiles. So there was a real latency problem there. So there's these things called vector tiles, which in the past, I would say 2 years, have started to catch on as a new way of moving information on the web, moving geographic information on the web. It retains that bite-sized efficiency of the original tile scheme, where you're only dealing with what's being displayed in a browser at any given time, but it shifts it from being a series of pixelated images into just straight up vector data. And in most cases, vector tiles you're going to see these days are chunks of text. This is just an example of what it looks like when vector tiles can be rendered on the front end. So by text, this is what I mean. This is an example of a tile that you would see for that section of Lower Manhattan. And it's got the same address as if you were to get the PNG image of that tile, but instead of an image, a simple square, 256 pixels by 256 pixels, you've got the GeoJSON that describes that data. So it's not styled; it's just geodata in a bite-sized little package of vector tile. So when you take that information and hand it to the map, there are it's still sort of a Wild West out there. Like there are many ways that the browser can turn that information into a visible map that makes sense to the reader. This is just a dynamic example of what you saw earlier. You can see, although actually depending on the lag on the webinar broadcast, you might not be able to see it that clearly, but you can see the tiles loading one at a time. And what's happening here is that I'm using an SVG library, D3, which many of you may be familiar with, to just render that GeoJSON text as it comes into the browser. And what happens there is, like, I've used a style that sort of accentuates the fact that you've got edges to these tiles. You can see along here that this SVG fade sort of cuts off because it's a tile boundary. And as we'll discover going into Mapbox Studio, there are definitely some rendering limitations that you run into when you use vector tiles as a background. But I'm going to say this probably many times throughout, that it's totally worth it. There are so many optimizations and efficiencies that come from using vector tiles. So what Mapbox has done is, using OpenStreetMap, the wiki world map, as a starting point, they have compiled this huge body of globally consistent data, and they're serving it as vector tiles. So for any point on the globe, you could ask for Mapbox's information at a particular zoom level. And that would include, they have satellite imagery, they have terrain derivatives. They're increasingly dealing with other information like queryable weather info. And at its heart, they have sort of like a mind-bogglingly large database of streets, buildings, places, land use, all of that stuff coming from OpenStreetMap. And what Mapbox Studio does is makes it available to you in this platform to style however you like. So just a quick overview of sign up and installation. If you, I'm going to skip the sign in here. If you go to mapbox.com, hit sign up. It's a pretty straight up interface for doing that. I'm going to skip this and go to sign in and just use my account. Whoa, actually, and this is kind of new. it's cool. They're reaching out to sort of different parts of the community. They come from sort of the software developer end, but they're increasingly getting into what would traditionally be considered GIS market. So they're sort of trying to figure out where you come from. I am just going to say GIS because that's where I come from. So once you have your account, I should say for the purposes of this demo, they've actually given me a promo code to use, which is Mapbox Friend 1, and that'll give you a free month of the. Let's see if I can remember what the level is. Under your profile here, you can check plans. And when you first sign up, you'll probably just be under the basic plan. The standard plan is, and I'll touch on this a bit later, is required to publish dynamic maps from Mapbox Studio. And it's not a cheap plan by the standards of the open source world. It's $49 a month. It's definitely affordable by the standards of GIS licensing, but it's still something I'm trying to wrap my head around. In any case, the promo code here, Mapbox Friend 1, if you enter in your billing information, I think that's required, you would go here and add a coupon code, and then they'll credit you with a free month of using the standard plan. So you'll be able to play around with those as you go. Leslie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm assuming the basic plan that you referred to is free?
It is, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
And they're very clear that using the Mapbox Studio platform without publishing to their web services is completely free, and you can make as many static maps from that as you like. Also, and I'm sort of an evangelist for free, meaning free. So I'm still having some difficulty with this, but the developers at Mapbox are they're also very dedicated to open source, as an ideal. And the entire stack that ultimately ends up rendering your map and sending it out into the world, making it available in the web browser, that is an open source stack. The only hurdle there is that it is, at the moment, kind of a complicated one to build. You need to have some software development skills to do it. So in theory, it is possible to use Mapbox Studio, publish your maps to the web, and not pay Mapbox for that. In practice, it is still a little bit difficult to do that. So in any case, that's how you would sign up. Then once you've downloaded Mapbox Studio, let's see if that's my next slide here. This link will take you to a download. It'll figure out what your platform is. For Windows users, there's an exe. For Mac users, there's a DMG. Linux users, I think it might be, I think there's a self-extracting package there too. But once I'm going to sort of move through this because it might take a little bit of time to install, and I'll let you guys play with it later on if you want to install while the rest of the webinar is going on. But once you have it installed, you'll be asked to authenticate it. Here, I'm using my Faraday account. But once you launch the platform for the first time, it'll give you this screen. You connect it to your Mapbox account. I'm already logged into Mapbox, so I'm going to use my Faraday login, and then go back to the beginning of the platform. So let me just make sure I'm on the right track here with the slides. Platform's running. Let's take a look at this thing. For those of you who used TileMill before, it's going to seem kind of familiar, but with some definite new and potentially confusing features. I'll just go back to the original window here. So this is Mapbox Studio. We'll go through each of these features individually, but just first the big things. Here's your map. This is always going to be a movable dynamic map. And what's cool about it, and at least what was cool to me when I first started using it, is that you very rarely have to think about the data, which I mean, as GIS folks, that was, when I got into it, it was like 98% of your job is going to be data wrangling and 2% is going to be cartography. And that, at least as far as GIS is concerned, I still find to be the case. But with Mapbox Studio, you're basically not thinking about the data. You're only thinking about how to style it. We can go to any part of the world at this point, and there will still be data behind the rendering that I've set up. Let's see here. Yeah, so even, you know, fairly tiny little hamlets in random places of Europe, sections of South America, wherever OpenStreetMap has coverage, which increasingly is the best coverage available, you will see data showing up in your map window, Mapbox Studio. The panel here on the right, and Leslie, just to ask you quickly, is my mouse visible as well?
Yes. Yes, I can see your mouse moving around.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. So this stuff that you see on the side here, this is the code that styles the map. And that was something that scared the crap out of me when I started using TileMill a while back, and now does not, and I hope that everybody can make that transition. I'm going to start with some stuff that makes it seem a lot less complicated than this. But for now, just so you know, this panel here, this is where you edit your code, and then the changes almost immediately show up in the rendered map. A few other things here, actually a number of other things here. There are several panels to the code, so each of these things is sort of a different context within the map. You can look at the data underneath, so this is kind of a cool feature where you're basically looking at a mesh of the raw vector data, obviously unstyled, although, and it is kind of cool nonetheless. The raw vector data under, and here you can see it's basically just this pile of stuff. But you can use this view to figure out if you're rendering things categorically or conditionally. You can see what other data is around that you might want to bring in. Like you can see that, you know, there's a mountain summit here, so you might not have that rendered on your version of the map, but there is something underneath there. There's information that you can map if you want to. There's the usual zoom controls. There's also full screen. Because this is a global platform, there's the ability to search for particular locations. Let's go to Paris. So it's a little bit like using you know, a standard Google Maps web map interface, but it's the reason you would search around is to see how your map looks in these different places. So if you have if you have the interest in doing that, then the capability is there. Something that I just, when Leslie and I were setting up the webinar, noticed, and is a new feature as of like, it seems like a week or two ago, is the ability to look at a broad swath of different types of cartography or of different land use types for your particular style. So this is a style I've got set up. Incidentally, this is the style that we use for print maps at Faraday. So you can see we're in Paris right now. What if I want to see what this looks like in the countryside? I can go to the Places button here, and there's these selections of different contexts. So if you want to get a sense of what your map looks like in a different place, you would look at, let's say, let's take a look at natural features. Cool. So find a bunch of like interesting terrain features. This is what the map looks like in those contexts. To look at parks, these are some examples of what the map looks like there. Land use, this is definitely the sort of thing that gets you out into the countryside. You're probably not seeing much on these because I'm not really rendering the land use layers with much detail. And then what it looks like in urban areas. And there's also the option to look at my places, which those you specify by adding whatever you're currently zoomed into. So in this case, I'm zoomed into Paris. If I add that, then it will be available under my places somewhere. Actually, that's a good question. Ah, there it is. And you can obviously keep sorting through these. This is a little bit like a mapbook feature, but it's more of a way of figuring out what your map looks like in a bunch of different contexts. So other features that you're gonna run into here are settings, where you would set up title, description. Attribution is key. By default, it includes the Mapbox and OpenStreetMap attribution, which is a requirement of the Open Database license from OpenStreetMap. You can set where you want the center of the map to be by default, and you can set what your export type is going to be. Usually the defaults here are fantastic, like 256 PNG is great. If you don't want users to be able to go in further than a particular distance, or if you don't want the map to zoom out further than a particular distance, you would set min zoom and max zoom. And what makes this honestly mind-bogglingly easier than any previous web mapping customization I've ever used is this upload button, where essentially you get the map in a style you like, you hit upload, and then it's just magically available on the Faraday or on the Mapbox platform in a dynamic version. Oh, still processing, but these are others that I have basically hit the upload button on and immediately have this web map available for use. Where do we go here? Okay, so that's essentially the settings. If you have another platform that can use this Mapbox layer package, it's basically just like a big wrapped up bundle of information that explains what layers are being used and how they're being styled. You can download the package here and use it in your own software. But that is something that I should say is probably meant for advanced developers or people who have sort of rolled their own stack. The layers are always available based on your source. So in this case, I'm using two sources. And you can see there are a bunch available provided by Mapbox, but in this case, I'm using Mapbox Streets v5 and Mapbox Terrain v1. So what that's giving me access to is a whole swath of street and place information, and then some terrain information as well. So down here you can see there's land cover, hillshade, and contour. We'll get to those later. But then all these street layers, land use, waterway, water arrowway, these are the features themselves. And then in order to maintain labels on top of everything, these are the label features above that. We'll reference those later and you'll see how those get styled. Mapbox comes with Studio comes with a bunch of fonts baked into it. All of these will be available on any map that you publish to the web. You can use your own fonts, but those tend not to be available for web publishing, usually because of license restrictions. If you use an open web font, they're currently building a system that's going to allow those to be used more easily. But for the most part, there's a really good selection of these. I've been able to, I mean, use Comica if you have a website in Comic Sans, but I would not recommend you do that. I've basically been able to find something that very closely matches any website I've been designing for. And that's kind of the power of this platform, is that your map is no longer, it's no longer dictated by the provider. The style of the map can be dictated by the website that you're trying to build it for, or the application you're trying to build it for, or the general graphic design you're trying to match. It's in that it is a truly powerful cartographic platform. If you need help, which I constantly need help when I'm looking through these things, the docs include an interface tour if you want to run through it. I'm sort of covering that, so I'll skip it for now. But there's a bunch of hotkeys. The kicker here, and this is the stuff that you'll end up referring to over and over again, is all of these parameters. These are all CartoCSS parameters. They get used in this section over here. And let's see if I can find a line one. Yeah, so like line opacity, and it'll tell you what it's expecting to see for that parameter. And this is whenever the code seems daunting, I just hit the Docs button and the information I need is available. So let me just make sure I'm still on slides here. That was a quick tour of the platform. The code-driven map. So CartoCSS, and this link here will take you to an online guide if you want to take a look at it now or reference it later. Where did that go? Okay. CartoCSS is a way of trying to make map styling available to web designers, and I realize how exclusionary that sounds. But web designers use these things called cascading style sheets, or CSS, to define how a website gets styled. And it turns out it's actually a really robust way to work with maps as well. You have certain hierarchies where you can specify that everything of a certain class gets the following basic style, like everything of class road gets a particular line width. And as in websites, in mapping, it becomes something that's a lot more efficient, and ultimately, as you work with it, more intuitive than the standard UI of clicking through menus for each individual layer, or even for batches of layers. Instead of menus, you just have everything available at once. And an example of that is, this is a CartoCSS parameter. This is line color equals blue. The syntax is fairly simple. I don't mean to gloss over the fact that this is code. It is possibly something difficult to get into, but if you're going to start with anything, this is a good one because of the simplicity. This is the parameter on one side of the colon, the value on the other side, and then to move on to the next parameter, you always put a semicolon. And we'll look at some examples of this. So let's start with just a basic style. If you want to create a new project, you go to your Projects button, hit New Project, and then they give you a bunch of templates to start from. And frankly, like, the templates are a little bit intimidating because they're really detailed. They have a lot going for them, and in some cases it's tough to improve on them, but they're really fantastic starting points for the idea of a complete bit of web cartography. So we'll start with a basic style, and you can see this comes in very simply, just country outlines, country names. As you go in, it will add places and roads, water features, things like that. This particular style never gets down to road names, considering that's a little bit too detailed. The thing that I'd like to do here is actually sort of wipe all of this information out. But before I do that, I'm just going to create this as a project. I've started with it as a template, but I need to save it to a particular location. I've just got a sort of a place where I store these things. We'll call this basic example, and then save it. And then that creates that layer package that then you can download later if you need to. But from here on out, every time I make a change to this and save the map, it will automatically update. So as an example, let's look at some of these parameters here. You can see that the name parameter up here is just a way of defining whether you want the names to be entirely in English or to be relative to the place where they come from. So, for instance, here you can see this is Hamburg in Germany and Geneva in Switzerland instead of the local names for those places. Your fonts would be specified here, and let's say there's a bold and a sans that I don't particularly like using here, so I'm going to look at these fonts I have available. No, thank you, Chrome, that is not check. Let's go with, oh, why the heck not? We'll go with the Comic Sans thing here. You copy that into the same location here, and then we'll see, once we save, what that looks like. There we go. All those have just changed. And then we go one further down, and you can see that there are colors. So these are Hex Colors. This is sort of a web standard, and there are a lot of good places to get ideas for how to use Hex Colors. I know that ArcMap and QGIS by default tend to lean towards RGB colors, and those are useful as well, and those can be specified here as well. But what's nice about Mapbox Studio in this case is there's always going to be a little swatch indicating what that color is. A couple of good resources for picking color schemes this way are, as always, Color Brewer. Color Brewer offers hex output if you want to use those. There's also things like, let's see, Color Scheme Designer. I guess that's renamed to Peloton.com, where it'll give you, from a starting color, it'll give you a palette of things that will work either as adjacent colors, triad, tetrad. But the point is, with these, you're always going to see that hex color title come up. So this is AA3939. Actually, you know what? I want to use a blue of some kind. So, well, let's go with that. So 4A2D73. I'm going to bring that back over. And enter it in here. You can see the swatch updates immediately. It's going to show me what that color will look like. Then I'll hit save again. And the color of the world has changed. This is, these sorts of immediate updates cascade entirely through the map. So everywhere you go from here on out, water is going to be that color. It's sort of like a universal data schema, and it's just pulling stuff directly from these color parameters. That was a basic usage of a map. Let's look at a couple other parameters in CartoCSS that are in play here. So for instance, let's look at, actually roads can be a little bit complicated. Let's see. You can see there's this big long swath of code defining all of these things here. We get down to water, and you can see that polygon fill is being defined by this variable called water. And back up top, that's what we just redefined. We gave it a new color, and then down below, it updates immediately. Polygon Gamma, Gamma is a way that it's going to be blending with the other features on the map. So we're not really going to play with that one right now. It's sort of more of an advanced feature, but we can try other things like polygon opacity. And what's nice about this, particularly if you need to be like, if you think of needing to pull parameters out of your head as you're coding, it's really not that, it's not that pleasant an experience. But what's nice is that Mapbox Studio has a function called tab complete. So basically you start typing something and then hit the tab button. It'll give you every possible option that you're typing. So let's say I want to change the opacity, and that would be a value of 0 to 1, so I'll give it like a 0.5, because maybe I want to put in some bathymetry underneath it or something, and the map updates immediately. So CartoCSS, like obviously there's a lot going on here, and many of these things need to be learned incrementally, but the best way that I have found to learn this is to just play with the parameters. So
hey Bill, can I
yeah,
interject? Stephen Smith had a comment about,
oh yeah, sure,
just going back a step to the color, that once you do have a color set, you should be able to click on that little swatch to change it as well. And that was correct, actually, yeah, okay, that was a question I had too, so when he sent that, I thought I would actually interject.
I totally apologize. That is a really good call. They've been adding many good UI features like that as we go. Something that I have noticed as I follow the development of this platform online, because it's in an open source repository, you can see every change that the developers make to the code base. I see they're in process of building something that will actually choose, it will allow you to choose color schemes much more intuitively. So something like this, they're actually in the process of building that into the platform. Yeah, so good call. I want to make that a little bit darker, and then I'll choose that color and save. And now the background's a little bit darker. The change wasn't dramatic because I'd set it to 50% transparency. But again, CartoCSS can be as simple as you like. It can be just defining country boundaries with a particular color and just giving fonts or just giving place names a particular font. Those things are fantastic to start with. This is a fairly simple example of how you would just sort of monkey around with the tools that they already give you. So that one's all set. We'll move on to a terrain example. Now, when I think of terrain typically, and here we'll just go to do a new project here. There's Mapbox Outdoors, there's also Run, Bike, and Hike, and then Satellite Afternoon. All of those start with, oh, actually even this one. All of these examples use Mapbox Terrain in them. I'll just try this one as a starting point. And again, save as. We'll call this terrain example. So when I traditionally think of hillshade, it is raster. Like, it is only raster. It's something that you create in a raster context from a DEM. It's something that you tweak the parameters, azimuth and zenith angle, in a raster context. What's kind of crazy is that this is actually vector hillshade. What you're seeing are a series of polygons, and as we go closer, we can see those. You can see they also have contour lines that are available with labels that you can add. This is a fully formed map here, so we're basically just sort of observing an expert cartographer at work with CartoCSS. But as we get closer, you can start to see some of the rounded edges of these polygons. And this is what, honestly, I'm still trying to grasp the implications of. This is very powerful in making everything vector. Everything has been sped up and been made much more flexible. If we look at the data underneath here, you can see the exact boundaries of those polygons. So hillshade has been pre-calculated. That obviously has some limitations for those of you who want to change zenith and azimuth angle, but for the most part it's pre-rendered exactly as you would want it. But that terrain data is already set and it's not raster. Moving on to another example. Something that I've really enjoyed doing is using textures in my maps. So you can see in this one that I showed earlier, this sort of geosprocket bright style, you can see that this is actually a texture image that's being used for water. So this is a fairly easy thing to do in Mapbox Studio. We'll take a quick look here. Just go to a slightly different project. Oh, actually, we'll go to geosprocket bright, and you'll see how I specified that. So there's that texture again. Basically, you have the ability to bring in images to use as that texture. So if we look here, you can see that for water, there's the polygon fill that's been specified, and again, that's the color specified as water up above. Let's see. Under the palette. And right here, you can see there's this polygon pattern file. And that's basically pointing to where I've stored a PNG called rough paper. And that now ends up being the underscore here of the water background. There are many different compositing operations you can do throughout Mapbox platform, whether the Mapbox Studio platform, whether it's using textured images like this or whether it's overlaying different vectors in different ways. In this case, I've decided to use the overlay compositing. There are a bunch of different things here you can use. Let's try color burn. If you're familiar with Illustrator, or if you're familiar with, let's see, I think in Photoshop and GIMP and Inkscape as well, this is where it would come up. This is a pretty standard graphic design tool to use a composite. Let's see, we'll try that. Yeah, so there's just a bunch of different ways to get the overlaid map color to interact with the texture underneath it. We'll go back to overlay. And then if you want to remove, and this is something that will be more broadly useful anyway, if you want to remove any particular line of code, but you don't want to get rid of it altogether, like you want to save it for later, you do something that is pretty standard in software development, which is you comment the code out. In Mapbox Studio, it's just 2 slashes like that, and then you save. Oh. And then the texture's gone. And then if for some reason I want to come back to that, I just uncomment those things, and it's there as well. What's nice about this being text is that you have every traditional undo option open to you. So as long as I keep hitting Control-Z, I can keep undoing and redoing the things that I've done throughout the platform. This is particularly nice for me as I go down one particular rabbit hole of styling that doesn't pan out. I can come back to the things that I do like. And it's something that, it ends up coming in very handy as you progress in your knowledge of CartoCSS, and then, hopefully ultimately as you progress in your knowledge of code styles in general. The idea of saving a bit of code for later becomes particularly important. So that was using textures with a bit of a tangent. There are many different ways that you can get these maps to look unique and sort of novel. In this case, I've adapted a Mapbox provided example that uses basically a series of sketched textures to create a map that looks as though it's hand-drawn. The texture that you see on the hillshade is a sketched paper that I pulled from some source online. Basically, like Google image search, find something that has an open license and plug it in. It's fun to play with. But what's more interesting is what the original Mapbox cartographer did here. Which is each of these lines you see, they look hand-sketched. They actually are hand-sketched. These lines are made up of a series of repeated textures. So when you see this little dashed line here, that's actually a repeated series of dashes. So like there's an example of a complete series of it. And the platform will just repeat it over and over. A quick example of what that looks like here is you can see, and this is some very advanced CartoCSS, but it's a cool application of the platform. You can see that the line pattern file is being specified throughout. So line solid 6, line solid 7, these are just different weights of hand-sketched, scanned, and imported lines. So essentially this is a hand-drawn map of the world that's just sort of repeated and recursive. One last point, and I notice we're getting a bit behind on time, is that they do have satellite options as well. And just to see what that looks like, they use Digital Globe as a provider, although they're increasingly using other sources as well. And as a result, you're still going to get a bunch of the swath and imagery border effects that you might be used to when you use, say, Google Maps as a background or Google Satellite as a background. But once you are out at the Landsat and further resolution, they have a remarkably consistent and very customizable map of the world. So that satellite imagery is available to anybody with the standard platform. It'll be available to you if you're playing around with that coupon code. And it's also something that goes down in great detail in most of the world, because, again, they're purchasing from Digital Globe. Okay, without getting into much detail here, I'm going to talk about how you publish the map. Oh, actually, you know what? It occurs to me I have already talked about how you publish the map. The settings, you hit upload to Mapbox, and then it's made available to you as a dynamic map. There are many more options on the Mapbox platform for what you can do with that. There's, the typical sharing with Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. You can embed, if you are using just tiles as a background to an application, then there's a very simple tile scheme that's sort of anchored by this map ID. But again, not going to get into details on that right now. Oh, right, the one thing I wanted to be sure to get to, and hopefully this will work, is publishing static maps. So let's say you have this section of northwestern Spain that you're particularly interested in having in a large format print, something that you can work into your other graphics, for public hearings, for whatever you end up using these things for typically. The output is up to an incredibly high DPI, so you can get 600 DPI, and set zoom, set boundaries. All of this is interactive as well here. And then just download the image. And the quality that comes out of this is a little bit mind-boggling to me. It's sort of the only print mapping platform I need now. Last note is sources. So basically, throughout this, you might have been wondering how you get your own data into Mapbox Studio, and the process, I think, is still a little hiccupy. It's not that difficult, but because all of the data coming into this is in the vector tile format, you also need to turn your data into vector tiles. Now, that's something that Mapbox does for you. In this case, you can see I have some sources available here. Like here's a line representing the long trail. In order to make this available in my web maps, I need to upload this as well to Mapbox. So once the source is uploaded, then it's something that I can bring into one of my styles. And that's sort of at least as far as I can tell, it's a couple of steps removed from a totally smooth process of integrating your own data. However, if you want to learn more about that, hit this link here, or just ask me specifically. And I don't know how much time we have left, Leslie, but are there any questions at this point?
Yes, I do have a few questions here, and I will remind everyone that this is your chance to compose and send in your questions. So I held on to a question from Joanna Grossman just because I thought we'd probably be able to address this at the end. When you were talking about the different Mapbox provided data styles or layers, she asked, can it also consume Esri Web Services, KML services, anything like that?
At the moment, it is meant entirely to consume protobuf tile JSON, which is it is an open format, but at the moment only Mapbox uses it. So I know we've heard that story from many different providers. Like it's an open format, but only we use it. At Faraday, we're actually currently building our own services as tile JSON protobuf because it's something that it moves really, really fast, and it will. I think it's actually what Google has behind the curtains, but they're not telling anyone. So it's sort of the future direction of where this stuff is going, and as a result, I think it's very unlikely that Esri will not at some point provide map services in the same format.
Okay. And then Stephen Smith, who was the one who pointed out that we could click on the color swatch to pick more colors, he had a couple of other comments about color. He says, I also love Adobe Color, K-U-L-E-R.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Color, but then it's color, color.adobe.com. And he said, especially to draw colors from an example image.
For sure. So, yeah, I won't get into this tool, but definitely hit color.adobe.com or KULER. Yeah, there are some fantastic palettes available there and some great tools for, if you don't want to, if you are trying to match a website to a map to a website that you didn't build, it's very easy to extract the color scheme and just use it directly in your Mapbox map.
Okay. Okay. Now, any other questions people have? This is your chance. I think, personally, I think our brains are spinning a little bit if we didn't already have some experience with this. This is kind of my first time being exposed to Mapbox, which is good. But
yeah, if I could say this many times throughout, I probably haven't said it enough. This can be as simple as you want it to be when you start working with it. You need not touch the CartoCSS to get some really cool maps and to make them available on the web. The fun part for me, though, is when I start playing with a single parameter, then with a couple parameters, and start getting a sense of how those things work. That's where the power comes in. That's where you are able to do the kind of cartography with this platform that you would previously need a combination of, ArcMap and Illustrator to do.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I find that interesting also that in the GIS community, we meaning the people I interact with and what we do, don't focus enough on cartography. So I think it's really good to see a platform that is actually primarily focused on cartography.
Yeah, it's actually trying to, and I'm sure to the detriment of some, it is trying to back end the data as much as possible. It's trying to push it out of the way.
Yeah. All right, I think you've stunned everyone into submission.
I know, right? Hey, thanks, guys. That was fun. And as this says, definitely get in touch with me if you have any questions or if you want a different starting point. I am a heavy Mapbox user, but I'm not a vendor, so I can tell you limitations and advantages.
Great. And as you said earlier, I'm going to take this link to your presentation. So when Bill was referring to clicking on the links in the presentation, that's because you too can access it directly and then click on the links that he has embedded in there. I will post that on our, actually let me go back to our website just very briefly to remind everyone that you can access our, I'm probably going to end up looking at my email or something. No, there we go. Back at our website, I just want to point out that if you go to our event archive, so if you click on events, and then event archive, and then webinars, you will see Bill's webinar listed up here, and it'll have the link to his presentation. It'll link to the YouTube page as well, but it'll have the link to his presentation here. So if anybody's looking for that. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Bill.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much.
And thank you to everybody for participating. If you have additional questions, you can send them to Bill or to me. I'll make sure they get to Bill. And appreciate all of you participating today. And hopefully you'll tune in next week for Bill's next webinar, which we didn't promote.
Am I next week or am I? Oh, that's true. Oh. Yeah. Next week I'm talking about using GitHub for geodata. So,
yes.
Yeah, everybody hit that too.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you, and everybody have a great day.